Thank you, Masarat, for that. Thank you for the invitation to be on your platform once again. It's always an honor for me, so thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Sayyedah Hassanali, and I'm a transformation and visionary leadership coach. I primarily help women, and this year there've been a lot of men too coming my way. So I help people find their inner visionary, awaken their inner genius, and unlock the potential that has been embedded in us. Part of that is being able to live a life full of purpose, one that has meaning, one that has a deeper intent, which just makes everything that much more joyful. And, really at the end of the day, it's inspirational. And that's how we actually feel that we're alive rather than just living in a very mundane way. So today's topic is what is our inner truth, and how can we align ourselves so that we can live our lives from the space of inner truth? And this process requires us to really slow down, right? So I'm going to be breaking up this topic into 5 parts. So it's going to be a discussion of 5 parts. And what I kind of had in mind was that after every segment, I'd kind of just check in with you first to see if you have any questions, if you have any feedback, and then towards the end of the presentation, we can open up the floor to everybody else for questions. Okay, so let's start. So how to slow down so that we can align with our inner truth. So the first question here is, well, what does it mean when we say our inner truth? What is our inner truth? So our inner truth, I have my notes here, so you're going to see me looking back and forth because I have my reference notes here. Our inner truth is the vibration of our inner authentic being. It's the vibration of our internal alignment. Think of it as almost like it's the signature of your soul. Okay, the part of you that's unadulterated, the part of you that's manipulation free, the part of you that has had any false conditioning by society or culture or limited belief systems. It's just the authentic you. Okay, so that's the inner truth. The inner truth is also the part of you that's not controlled by, our inner impulses that stem from lower desires, right? Because as human beings, we do tend to become very impulsive, and that's because our lower desires or lower emotions are controlling that. So our inner truth is free of all of that. So another way that I would like to describe inner truth is when we are in alignment with A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitani Rajim, which if you really look at what that means, it's I seek refuge from all that is within me and all that is outside of me. Or in other words, I seek refuge from all my internal chaos and all the noise, the internal noise and the external noise. And that's what keeps you in a state of balance. Okay, so our inner truth is that part of us that is in alignment, in balance. And when we are born, we come in absolute alignment. And then when we go through life and we go through the different experiences, it kind of pulls us out of alignment. So that is the first part of the discussion. I just wanted to establish that. What does it really mean when we talk about the inner truth? Any feedback or any questions here, Musarath?
If anybody's got any questions, you can write in the chat. So when you say about inner truth, it's when we're born with, we've got the inner truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
And does it kind of change as we get older into life, isn't it?
Exactly. So it's like the signature of your authentic soul, which then gets adulterated over time because of the human experiences. And I don't want us to even look at it from a space of judgment, when we go through that misalignment or this is a bad thing. No, it's the human journey. We're going to be met with trials and tribulations that will kind of pull us out of alignment. So this is not so much to judge us being in misalignment, but just to identify what is inner truth and what is not, right? Okay, so then on to the second part of this segment. Well, then what does it really mean to slow down? And how is slowing down going to help us detach from all versions of our inner and outer reality that we have created within ourselves that are really misaligned. Because for as long as we're not aligned with the truth, what ends up happening, we start creating realities, both in the inner world and the outer world. And for the most part, they're illusions, right? They're illusions. So what does the slowing part offer us? So slowing down is really aimed at helping us come back into balance, come back into the truth of reality, right? Because you and I may understand reality one way, but it's just the lens and the perception of what we understand. It may not be the ultimate reality, right? Imam Ali, I know, has a really amazing hadith, which for the life of me, I cannot make sense with the left brain. The soul just resonates with it so much. It's called Hadith Hakika. It's the hadith of the ultimate reality. And I've always, every time I read it or I hear it, like something happens, but the left brain can really not make sense of it. It's extremely, it's very deep philosophically, mystically, but it's beautiful. It always helps me understand that what I see as reality is not really the ultimate reality. It's just a perception of reality. And if I want to reach my human soul's potential, that it requires me to align in that way. Okay, so then moving on. So like I said, when we're misaligned, we will tend to create versions of our inner and outer realities that are false or, just inauthentic in nature. So let's go with some examples here. So let's say I carry a lot of internal insecurities, or I have some, a void inside of me that perhaps was created from an experience as a child, let's say, right? And it left this void. There's an emotional wound that's left behind. So what ends up happening is that for as long as we have voids and these kind of insecurities, the ego comes in. Again, ego, I feel like has a very bad reputation, but ego is just a defense mechanism, right? It's just doing what it's supposed to do, which is defend you, and like comes out as this harsh ego. But what ends up happening is that this ego then kind of takes over, and it forces us to pursue or create a reality that is really just masking that internal void. And many of us are not even consciously aware of this. It's a very unconscious programming that's happening. There's some internal insecurity within us, and then what ends up happening is that we can't necessarily work with the pain, or it's too heavy. The insecurity is too heavy, so the ego goes into the driver's seat, and it's creating or pursuing a reality. So, for example, what does this false pursuit look like? Often at times we're in pursuit of even a false identity, right? It's incredible, Sarat, the amount of masks that we wear. And I only say this because I have been there personally, right? When I look back since I started this journey of self-discovery and self-development, and I sit sometimes and I'm like, the amount of masks that I have worn throughout my life is incredible. And I don't do that in a space of judgment. It's more curiosity. If there's anything I have learned in my journey, is when we go into that space of judgment, it kind of like it almost distracts us from really just sitting with what we need to sit with. So sometimes you just need to look at it from a space of curiosity, like, wow, okay, well, Sayyedah, why were you wearing all these masks? And then I see this mask, slowly falling off. And in that process, you're coming into a state of alignment. And what's really interesting is I don't think I have dropped all the masks. I still believe I carry some masks which are unconscious, but that's part of this journey, is getting deeper and deeper, a deeper connection with your authentic self. So we end up creating a false identity, and this false identity is around our jobs, our career. So, many of us, we will pursue careers not out of passion, but out of having an element of, this is the degree that I hold, like, there's a pride element attached to it. And it's nothing to do with passion, but just to be able to come across as I am better than the next person because I hold a certain degree. I'm more educated than the next person because I hold a certain degree, right? And so really that's just the ego playing its game. So it's really important to identify that we do pursue false identities, we create false realities, and these are around our careers, even our partners, our spouse, our children, our wealth, our projects, so it's really important to, I know this is something that I've had to assess throughout my journey is, am I creating a false identity around these things? Is it an element of pride and ego, or am I able to have a deeper meaning and connection around these different parts of my life? So what slowing down does then is it allows us a process of deeper introspection, right? It allows us a process of deeper introspection to help us catch and spot all of these unconscious cycles that we may be trapped in, okay? And it's, again, it's really interesting. You wouldn't think it until you actually go deeper into yourself and you recognize, hold on, like this cycle that I have been living is a very unconscious cycle. It's not a mindful one. I'm not conscious. I'm just on repeat mode constantly, right? And so it really, slowing down is like we're now moving on to an observation deck. And from that observation deck, we're looking back at our lives and we're trying to introspect which areas of our lives are we just spinning in circles like a hamster wheel. We're just going round and round and round, but we're not really progressing. It may seem like we're progressing at the very superficial level, but at the deeper level, the void is still there. In fact, the void is getting even bigger and louder, right? And that's why many of us have experienced midlife crisis, because we have pursued this life up to a certain point, and we get to a point where all of a sudden there's this deep sense of emptiness or sadness or loneliness within ourselves. And that's when things start to slowly fall apart. But that's just because that emptiness and the sadness and the loneliness that we sometimes feel is really because we're just disconnected from our inner truth. So that's what that loneliness, the anxiety, the sadness, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So having said that, let's now, talk about, well, what does slowing down really look like then? It's just practical things that we can do to help us to really just slow down. Now that we've understood, what it really means to align with your inner truth, and then what it means to say, the benefit of slowing down. So what does a slowing down really look like? So the first one is we need to start simplifying our lives. Okay, so you and I, when I say you and I don't literally mean you and I, just like in general, all of us, right? We tend to pick up 10, 20, 30 different activities, and we're doing 10, 20, 30 different things. The first part of, if you really want to start coming into space of alignment, simplifying your life has to be the first step. So what this means is we need to start taking inventory. So for example, make a list of all the activities that you are a part of, okay? And then from those daily activities or activities that you do on a regular basis, try to identify which ones are draining you and which ones are actually fueling you or energizing you. The ones that are draining you, it's sucking the life force energy out. And the ones that are fueling and energizing you, it's adding on to you. So we really need to take, it's kind of like accounting for, it's like energy bank. We have an energy bank and we need to do the debit and the credit, like what is adding on and versus what is pulling out. And this may sound really simplistic, but it is such a powerful practice. A lot of times when I'm working with clients, the first thing I'll tell them is, before we start this process, simplifying has to be the first step. So just simplifying, identifying what activities are draining you, what activities are adding, which ones can you let go, because you've got to make room. It's kind of like saying, and I always use this analogy, if I was to buy furniture in my home, new furniture, I've got to get rid of the old furniture first, because then there's just no room. So that simplification process has to start. The other thing that we can do to slow down is we've got to declutter our mind. So in other words, brain dumping. You and I have fears, we have worries, we have our insecurities, we have our doubts, we have envy, we have jealousy, we have all kinds of emotions. And remember, on average, just as an estimate, a human being experiences 90,000 thoughts on any given day. And from one day to the next, they're literally, whatever thoughts you have experienced in that one day, you're taking it over to the next day. And so you're just like carrying over the same toxic, negative energies from one day to the next. So it's so important to do this brain dumping exercise on a regular basis, where you're just releasing all that is just noise. Back to Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge from my internal chaos, from the internal noise, and the outside external noise, right? And so that's, I know for me personally, brain dumping is really key, especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed or misaligned. My absolute go-to is brain dumping. And then the third thing here is decluttering our physical space. We have got to simplify and clear things out. Clothes, shoes, handbags. And I know as women, this is a tough one for us. We need an outfit and shoes and a handbag for every other occasion. I totally get that. I've been there, but I recognize it was just noise. And so for me, one of the big things was to just really, there is some wisdom and beauty that's embedded in simplicity. I have been researching, this is because it's an area of interest for me. I've been researching the lives of different philanthropists and different visionaries. It's something that's, like I said, very interesting for me. And when I look at some of their lives, they're so simplistic in nature. They're multimillionaires with the kind of visionary and philanthropy work that they do, but they're so simplistic in nature. And there is something absolutely beautiful about that. Because we end up creating an identity around our belongings. And that just takes us away from our core identity, who we really are at the core level. And so it's really important to go through this process of simplification, so you're removing all these distractions around you. And the last two things is triggers. Triggers. You and I mean, we all get met with triggers, right? On any given day, there is a bunch of triggers that show up, whether it's, with our coworkers, whether it's with our family members, you name it, that with our partners, with our children, the triggers will always come up. But triggers are really, if we're able to, and this is where emotional intelligence kind of kicks in, is if we're able to just sit with our triggers. The triggers have so much to communicate. It's just showing parts of you that are misaligned and just need to come back into a state of balance. And even as I'm talking about this, it's just coming to me right now that we're in the month of Rajab, and the month of Rajab is all about forgiveness, right? But what does it really mean? Forgiveness can only exist if you're in a state of sin. But what does sin really mean? If you were just for a moment to just pull out the connotation of sin is bad, sin is haram, like if we were to just pull that out and just be curious for a moment, well, what is really a sin? A sin is anything that takes you away from alignment. Right? And so the process of istighfar is just to help us come back into alignment. And we're asking God, like, oh, help me come back into alignment, right? So it's quite interesting. I didn't really plan this out that way, but we're just talking about slowing down and coming into our alignment. That's really so what I'm discussing, I'd like to think of it as the practical form of the dhikr, right? The dhikr is one thing, and then this is like a practical form that we can implement in our life. So triggers. And then sitting with your emotions, another really big one, being able to just sit with our emotions. And this is a very tricky one. We are never able to sit with our emotions, right? We just get disturbed. It's so uncomfortable sitting with our emotions. And so many of us end up distracting. We create a life that is so full of distractions because we just cannot sit with the discomfort of our pain, uncomfortable emotions. And I'll kind of get to that a little, I'll talk about that a little bit more as we move on. So these are some of the practical things that we can do to really just slow down, you know. And I find, especially when we're not able to sit with our emotion, we're running. There's a process of running. We're actually running. And so when you find yourself, because this is how I lived my life for a very long time, I was a very busy person, extremely busy person. And there, I wouldn't be able to, I never had time to just be with myself. But it's not that it wasn't available. It's just that consciously I told myself I just don't have the headspace to sit with myself. There's just so much going on. But when I really reflect on it, it's because I was always running away from myself, right? And that's what we human beings do. We run away from our emotions. So this is a big one, big one, big one, especially if we want our mind heart, the mind heart coherence to come into balance, because many of us, you know, we live in our heads too much, and things we're disconnected from the heart space. And so the heart-brain coherence, for that to come into formation, it really requires us to just sit with our emotions. Dr. Joe Dispenza, as somebody that I have researched quite a bit, you know, he talks a lot about this. He talks about sitting in the ring of the fire of your emotions. So that ring of fire is the discomfort, because sitting with our emotions is a very uncomfortable feeling, right? And so if we can do that, and this is a muscle that we develop, it's really just a muscle, but it'll really help slow down our pace. So to conclude this segment, speeding up really only ends up making our lives more complicated. Okay, it does make our lives complicated. It consumes a lot of our energy, and best case scenario, it will only aim to solve one aspect of the challenges that we face. Okay, so that's the thing with speeding. When we're always on that, you know, the fast lane of life, we'll just be creating, life just tends to get complicated and more energy is needed. And so just keep sucking out the life force energy that we have within us. Ms. Sarat, any comments, any questions here?
Anyone has any questions or any comments? I think someone's asked about the hadith in the chat, the hadith that you mentioned about Imam Ali. Maybe you can share it later if you've got it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Hadith Hakika. Hadith Hakika by Imam Ali. Narina is saying, I've never looked at it that way. Amazing. Tasmia, this session is recorded, so you'll have a chance to go over it, the parts that you have missed.
And I think someone mentioned, yeah, is isolation, what was it? Sorry, just there's a question there about isolation. And also when you say clearing your mind, do you recommend, like, in terms of how many minutes to do on a daily basis? And also sitting with your emotions, is it something that we need to sit with our emotions on a daily basis, or how often?
You know, I'm happy to give some guidance around that, but I'm the kind of person who I would say just sit with yourself and ask yourself, how much time are we spending with myself? How much time am I going to spend with myself today? Because that just builds this, because we want to build this relationship, because you have an inner coach inside of you, right? So, and and this sometimes frustrates some of my clients, because I'll put it back on them and I say, well, what do you think? Right? Because I want us to build that muscle within ourselves where we're checking in with ourselves, you know, that's a component of that self-awareness, right? Building that relationship within ourselves and saying, okay, how should I do this? You know what, maybe I'm just going to start with once a week. maybe brain dumping and sitting with our emotions is a very uncomfortable process, and maybe it might be too much to do it on a regular basis. So we can start by saying, okay, maybe, well, once a week I'll sit down, right? And then as you get better at it, you will absolutely you will fall in love with the process, because you're going to start experiencing the relief that comes with that. Because we get caught up in the head, but when you start brain dumping and you're like, oh, and I usually, when I brain dump, I even like to go to the extent of either tearing it up if it's just stuff that's really heavy, or even burning it, right? And that it just gives this such a profound level of relief that comes with that. And then you'll end up maybe journaling every other day or every day, right? I know some people who have been brain dumping and now have gone to the part of meditating every day, but they couldn't meditate or brain dump for the life of, like, it just wouldn't happen, but it was a practice, right? So someone is suggesting meditation works well too, to settle your mind, and then brain dump. Yeah, it's absolutely whatever works for you. For some people, brain dumping is easier because they're just they live in their head so much. For some people, meditation is a good place to start. So really, it's whatever works for you the best, right? When you talk about brain dumping, is that connecting with being in the present? Absolutely. That is. So when we talk about brain dumping, it's to help us slow down. But what does slowing down then really mean? And thank you, Sayyedah, for that point. It really means coming back into the present moment. And we'll talk about why. What is the gift of the present moment? I remember when I would listen to podcasts about the present moment, I mean, I kind of understood it rationally speaking, but it was like, okay, well, it couldn't go beyond the logical mind, where it's like, okay, well, I want to experience this because I'm not experiencing this. I understand it. I can rationalize it. It logically makes sense, but I'm not feeling it. It's only when I started this process of brain dumping and meditating where I started to experience the present moment. So it's something that can never really be explained, kind of like motherhood, until you actually become a mother. It's one of those things. You have to go through the process to actually experience the present moment, which has such a profound gift. That gift is, all of a sudden, it's when you're in that present moment, you are now connecting to the heartbeat of life. You know, you're connecting to something that's bigger than yourself. You know that beautiful hadith of Imam Ali where he says you think you're a small entity, but within you is unfolded an entire universe. Every time that hadith just like gives me goosebumps, because it's like, what are you talking about? There's a whole universe, you know? And I'm finding the more I practice, the more I slow it down, the more I'm able to practice the present moment. And it's from that space that you then are able to connect with the heartbeat of life. So it's like, you're coming out of it's not just you, because, you know, we're always so self-absorbed in ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions, our experiences, our trials, our tribulations, our stress. But when we learn to get into this practice, we're then slowly coming out of that. And then you see life differently. You're like, oh, hang on, there's a whole other life that exists beyond my tunnel vision that I've been living in, right? So this whole slowing down process is really about coming out of the tunnel vision. Sitting with emotions could be done connecting to Allah, spilling out your worries and emotions. Absolutely. For any emotions to really, like, for us to experience the highest level of relief, it's done in God consciousness. There is no doubt about it. I have worked with many different mentors, coaches, gurus. I've even worked with, spiritual coaches from different schools of thought, because I'm just the type of person who loves to learn from different cultures. They all have so much wisdom embedded. And sometimes their messages are just universal in nature, right? And so I that's one of my interests and passions. And when I've sat with different schools of thoughts, coaches from different schools of thought, the one thing I've learned from all of them is it's really in God consciousness where you find that absolute relief, right? So when you're sitting in the ring of the fire of your emotions, do it with the 99 names of Allah. Bring that energy in. When we bring that energy in, the 99 names of Allah, whichever name comes up for you, and you sit with that and you release it. And I know this like may not logically and rationally make sense, but there's a whole metaphysical thing that's happening. It's, you know, it's metaphysical science at the end of the day. And thankfully, there is science out there who actually demystifies this whole process. You know, Dr. Joe Dispenza does a lot of talks about a lot of these things of meditating, sitting with your emotions and releasing. And we take it a step further and we say, well, do it with the 99 names, do it within God consciousness. So thank you, Tasmia, absolutely. Okay, so then moving on. So the third part of the segment, for as long as we continue staying misaligned. So we've talked about what the inner truth is. We've talked about the benefit of slowing down. We've talked about how we can slow down. Now we take it a step further and we need to talk about the other side of the coin. What are the disadvantages of continue living a misaligned life? Okay. You know, I wouldn't have known this if I had not gone through the experiences that I have gone through, not just my own, but just working with the different people that I have worked with. And of course, I've worked with, you know, over 100 people, hundreds of people now over the last 5 to 6 years. And it's so interesting how when we do not process these thoughts in our head, the emotions that we have, it's so interesting how we tend to look at life. You and I can be looking at the same thing, but we'll have completely different perceptions of it. And it's so interesting. And then the question is, well, whose perception is the correct one? Is mine the correct one or is yours the correct one? How do we know? Perhaps neither one of us has the correct perception of what we're looking at. And so it's so interesting how these unprocessed thoughts and unprocessed emotions really skew our perception of reality. And so when we continue living a misaligned life, at best, we are only going to be living very superficial lives, and we'll only be carrying transactional relationships. Okay, our relationships are not, you know, founded in God consciousness, but they're very transactional in nature. Right? And you and I can say that, oh, we're God conscious, we believe in God, but there's a difference in knowing God, that God exists, and then really believing, right? And so I find that even in my journey, the more I unravel myself, the deeper my belief becomes. Because there's a part in my journey where I had major beef with God. You know, I felt like, oh, where have you been when I was going through all of these situations? Do you really exist? I went through that questioning phase in my younger days, you know, and then the deeper I went into my journey, the deeper the belief becomes, because, you know, you're going back to your essence. So at best, we can only live superficial lives when we have all this misalignment within us. And so what happens when we're living superficial and transactional lives? Outer reality may look good to anybody looking in, nice house, nice career, family, children, but internally, you're just feeling stuck. That's one of the side effects of living a misaligned life. We start feeling stuck inside. And, you know, in the beginning, I wasn't necessarily ready to admit that I was feeling stuck. Because I'm like, oh, hang on, I have this amazing career. I was an actuary before I transitioned into coaching full time. I'm like, oh, I have an amazing career. I have an amazing family. I have a beautiful husband, beautiful children. Everything looks good. But to the outside, it absolutely looked good. But internally, there was a void. And my ego was not ready to admit that I had a void inside, because I just wanted everything to be perfect. But even that was just a mask or an illusion that I was living in. But when I really started my deeper journey, and this only began when I lost my best friend, when she passed away, it triggered something. You know, it kind of like all the cracks in my life started showing up. And I was like, hang on, you know, there's I'm living a very superficial life here. And it forced me to go within. And when I went within, I was quite surprised, and I would have never admitted it. But in that moment, I recognized I'm not happy. I can't say that I'm internally happy. Everything looks good on the outside. But if I really sit with myself, I didn't feel internally happy. And so what ends up happening is we do get stuck in cycles of being stuck, or sadness, or anxiety, or just feeling uninspired, or exhausted, or just this energy of dull, like our light has just been dimmed out. And so here, when we are living a life of misalignment, we are living superficially, we are living very transactionally, and this ends up keeping us stuck in these type of cycles, right? However, when, let's say, for example, if we're experiencing depressive emotions, right? Even depression has such a stigma around it, right? But depression is actually such a beautiful, healthy response of your body to a environment that's misaligned, whether internally or externally. So depression is actually, if we were to just flip the narrative and just, instead of having this stigma around it, right? And looking at it as, oh, hang on, this is actually such a healthy way that my body is communicating to me that I'm misaligned. And so I especially in our culture, in the Indo-Pak culture, we don't like to talk about these things, and we don't like to necessarily admit it, but it would be nice if we just flip the narrative and flip the script on this one, because it's actually a very beautiful thing if we allow ourselves to see it that way. Any comments or questions here, Masarat?
Don't think there is, but I think everyone agrees with you. It's just so relatable.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Amazing. So Tasmia is adding there that just putting all of the emotions into Allah's court and just saying Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil makes you feel so light. Absolutely. And there's something here that I would absolutely love to add. It's not just about saying, okay, Allah, this discomfort that I'm feeling, just take it away. Like, just take it away. That's also a form of bypassing. It requires us to actually sit with it. So if you sit with it, like the Tasmiyah is saying, sit in his court, so you're feeling protected, right? Maybe you need to, project yourself, use creative imagination, creative visualization, and project yourself into his house, into the Kaaba, and sit there, and then just feel whatever it is that you need to go through. And so here, I want to talk a little bit about this process. So when we sit with our emotions, and this can be tricky. When you sit with your emotions, it's important not to go into a place of self-loathing, by the way, or victimization, or even saying, bichari me. That's not what it is, because then you'll drop into victimization. You want to sit with your emotions. You want to feel the emotions, but you don't want to become the emotion. So as soon as you say, bichari me, or self-pitying, you are going into victimization straight away. So you've got to just be and feel the emotions. And as you go deeper, it's kind of like, there's a conversation that Musart and I were having before we jumped on this call, is think of a tunnel. Okay. So you're dropping into the tunnel, and you will eventually come out of the tunnel. All you have to do is just sit through that heavy emotion, go through it. You can have Ziyarat Ashura playing as you're doing this process. You can have Dua Kamil playing as you're doing this process. One of my favorites is Hadith Kisa. And so whatever spiritual tools you want to use it and sit with your emotions. And you just sometimes need to witness your emotions. Here's what happens when you witness your emotions this way. When you witness your emotions this way, you get to meet a deeper part of you that you would have never met. And there's some level of beauty that cannot be put into words that you experience when you meet yourself at the deeper level, because the person that you're really meeting is your authentic being. It's your essence. And when you start to meet that person, and of course, I when I look at all the ascended masters, I think they had they had connected with themselves at such a deep level that they reached that high level of enlightenment. I don't know if we can ever reach that stage. I'm not sure. I would love to think we can, but I don't know. It's a process. Yeah, it's a lifelong process, but that's the beauty of it. Fatima's question, are you able to give some more practical tips as how to embark on this journey, almost like a plan for someone who's very interested to try this? Okay, so right off the bat, Fatima, the next time you experience a heavy emotion, just catch yourself, right? So I know, and this happens, for example, you'll have a beautiful family get together and everything is amazing and everyone's happy and you've all had a really good time. You wake up the next morning and all of a sudden there's this heavy feeling. You're like, what? I just had an amazing weekend with my family. How am I feeling this heaviness? Don't intellectualize it. Don't even go into spirituality. So this is like shadow work now, right? Before you go into the spiritual aspect, before you try to even rationalize or intellectualize it, just be with the emotion. That's the first step. Learning how to just, when an emotion comes, you be with it, you sit with it. Don't try to figure out where it's coming from. Don't say, Allah, oh, please take this away from me. No, just sit with it first before you start any of that process. That will create this opening for you. So the first practical tip here that I can tell you, the next time an emotion comes in, welcome it. Welcome it in. Don't fight it. Don't distract. Don't start binge eating. Don't start binge watching. Don't start cleaning and vacuuming your house, because that's what I do. When I'm met with a heavy emotion, the vacuum comes out. I'm like, okay, I gotta clean. And I wouldn't necessarily always recognize it, but now I do. I'm like, oh, I'm running away from something, and I stop and I just sit with the emotion. And sometimes it feels heavy, so I breathe, just breathing through it, but I'm witnessing the emotion. And that's all it requires, is the emotion just wants to be witnessed. And there is some expansion that happens when we can just witness the emotion. Okay, so that's really the only thing that I'm going to say here is just to, when the emotion comes, welcome it in, sit with it, and just be self-aware. Oh, am I escaping it? Am I distracting myself? And just sit with it, right? For 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long it takes for the emotion to pass, because the emotions never stay. They're just passing through. And so we just want to welcome them in as they're passing through. Okay. Moving on to the fourth segment, we just have 2 more sections and then we'll open up the floor more to question answers. So now we know that if we're not misaligned, we're going to end up living very superficial transactional life. It may look good on the outside, but internally there's a lot of void. So what happens? What is the beauty then if now we're coming back into alignment? We talked about what slowing down means, what it looks like. So when we start to realign and start to realign with our inner truth, which again, I personally feel this is a lifelong process. I don't think it's a one-shot thing. I don't think I'm anywhere close to that. I know I'm closer than I've ever been, but there's still a long way to go. So it's going to be a lifelong process. But what this does is it puts us on a path of expansion. It puts us on a path of creativity. It puts us in a path of flow. It puts us on a path of inner balance, inner harmony, authenticity. And where there's authenticity, you start to trust yourself more, because when you're not misaligned with yourself, it's hard to trust yourself. Again, I've been through this, so I'm really just speaking out of experience here. It's hard to trust yourself. When you find it hard to trust yourself, you're also going to find it hard to trust life. And so then we look at life as, fearful, or, we don't look at life as, hang on, life is here to support you. Allah has created this entire, I remember reading one of his Asmaul Husnas, and it said that he's created this universe to serve you. But that's not how I interacted with life. That has changed now, but in the past, I didn't interact with life as if life is here to serve me in my bigger purpose, right? And so When we start to realign, expansion happens, creativity flows in, harmony comes in, balance comes in. So here I want us to think of this as an onion, and we're peeling the layers until we get to the core of our being. So as you start peeling the layers, one mask falls out, and you will see the more you learn to feel your emotions, your masks will automatically start to fall out. You don't even have to do it in a strategic manner. Okay, this mask I carry, this mask I carry, that. It just automatically filters out. And that's the beauty of this process, right? And so layers of the onion are starting to peel off one by one. It comes out. What ends up happening in that process? Strength gets born, real strength, not the version, not the ego version, right? You and I can go to the gym and we can build all the muscles and our core muscles and we can come out physically strong. But if we were to stand up for truth, we would be the first ones to bounce probably, right? Because we don't have the internal strength or the internal courage. So when we start peeling off our layers, then a real true courage gets born. Your inner strength gets born. Resiliency comes to play, right? Clarity, creativity, and the masks start to fall off. And let me say this, the mask that we unconsciously wear, and I know I'm still unconsciously wearing some masks as well. And, you know, these are blind spots that, like I said, is just a forever process that happens, right? But this mask that we carry, this is a waste of energy. Think about the amount of energy it's just taking to carry these false personas, you know? And so you will find that when these masks fall out, all of a sudden you're more energized because your energy is not going into keeping up with the false persona, right? So another really good analogy that I like to use here is think of a water pipe. So let's say we have a 20 feet water pipe or water hose that we use to water our garden, for example. Now imagine if that 20 feet water pipe had all these kinks in it. Okay, the flow of the water is not going to be able to come out with the right flow, right? So all these kinks are like the misaligned aspects within ourselves. But when we slowly start to unravel them, we unravel one kink and then we untwist the other kink. And then the end of it, we have this gush of water coming out. So in the same way, when we work on ourselves in that manner, we're removing all the kinks. So what ends up happening is that we have a life force energy that exists within us. In Arabic, it's called Qudra. In Chinese, it's called Qi. In Japanese, it's called Ki. In Sanskrit, it's called, what's it called in Sanskrit? I forget. But, you know, every different language has a label for it, but it's essentially your life force energy. And so your life force energy expands. And so think of it as this is your Wi-Fi signal with Allah's universe that's expanding. Right? And then it's slowly you'll start to experience the interconnectedness with life. What does it mean, interconnectedness? Yes, the mudra. Thank you, Shanaz. You'll start to experience when your life force energy starts to magnify, you'll start to experience this interconnectedness with life. And then all of a sudden you start getting glimpses of what Imam Ali might have been talking about, because I don't even think we understand the full grandness of that hadith, but you know, there's a whole universe unfolded within you. Then you start experiencing the small little things and you're like, whoa, hold on, what's happening here? So this is the benefit of realigning with our authentic self. It opens up this life force energy, and then you're starting to look at things differently than you ever had. Prana, that's what it was. Mudra, I think, is the forms, and then the prana is the actual life force energy. Thank you, Bilkis. Okay, and so one of the last things that I want to add here is real success only comes from true alignment. Okay. Like I said, I've been researching the work of different philanthropists, coaches, visionaries. I've had the pleasure and opportunity to work with some really amazing coaches. And the one thing that I have learned, and these are, many of them are like multimillionaires. And the one thing that keeps saying is that you can have all the money in the world and all the possessions in the world. And I've seen that in my own practice. I see a lot of people who come to me who are so successful, but there's so much emptiness within them. And so real success is alignment. Okay. Any questions or concern before I just close off this? No? Okay, we're good? Okay, excellent. Okay, so then, and to just summarize this all and to tie it all in together, the closer we come to living in alignment, something beautiful starts to happen. Like I said, this life force energy starts to expand within us. And as the life force energy expands, something really beautiful happens. The inner visionary starts to wake up. You're inner visionary, okay? Now, what's so cool about this inner visionary? What does this inner visionary have to offer us? This inner visionary carries the map. It literally, sometimes we say, oh, I wish I just had a manual for life. When we go through trials and tribulations and challenges and we don't know how to work through different situations, we're like, if only we had a manual, where we could just kind of look at what we need to do in this situation, right? We've gone through those moments where we wish we had that. Well, we do have that, except it's just not in the book form. It's an internal thing. It's an internal GPS. And so this inner visionary really is it's your lighthouse, right? It's your inner lighthouse. And it carries the map. It shows the path in helping us reach our highest potential. And, and I've talked about this in the past that, we've come here to live our purpose. And sometimes I myself have gotten caught up in, well, what is my bigger purpose? And really, at the end of the day, true purpose is just coming back into alignment. That's the real purpose. And then in that process of coming into alignment, if you find, that you find your place of passion and purpose in like an act of service, beautiful. But the real bigger purpose is just finding yourself and coming into alignment where it's the path of God consciousness, because that's where we come from, right? And so as we reach our highest potential, this inner visionary is the one that really holds all the answers that we seek. Imam Ali has a beautiful hadith here. He says, listen and you will teach yourself. Okay? And so the more we can go deep into ourselves, we'll be able to hear the answers. And then the inner visionary, so this inner visionary, it doesn't exist in the 3D world of consciousness, because the 3D world of consciousness is full of fear and guilt and envy and jealousy. It's like all these low vibrating emotions. And that's why it's important for us to sit and go through this process. What that does is it expands the consciousness. Like I said, when the life force energy expands, your consciousness expands. And when your consciousness expands, you're able to find solutions that exist in higher states of consciousness, not in the 3D realm of consciousness, but in higher states of consciousness. So that's the beauty of this inner visionary. It really holds the map and it holds the solutions for every challenge that you have. It's things that your mind cannot even come up with. And you think about this, and I always say this, in the world that we live in, our IQ levels are super high, right? We are doctors and engineers and pharmacists and scientists, you name it. Like the IQ level is so high, the intellectual intelligence, but that didn't take away the wars. That didn't take away poverty. That didn't take away child slavery or kidnapping or sexual trauma. It didn't take away any of that. So this is where we recognize that it's not just about finding solutions from here, because clearly this world, if anything, is in more disarray than it's ever been. So this never really helped solve any bigger problems. It helped us get richer wealthier, more greedier perhaps, right? But it didn't really solve the bigger real issues. And so when we get in touch with this inner visionary offers solutions that are available in those higher states of consciousness. It's beyond even your mind, right? It's like an awareness, an insight, an intuition. But in order for us to really find that, get to that place, this work has to be done first, right? And so just to finally close this, when we move into alignment, it's not like the challenges of life stops coming at us. They never stop coming. Just what ends up happening is like the waves are constantly coming, but when we're aligned, we start surfing the waves. So if you think about it, when the waves coming and they're pulling you in, well, it's kind of drowning you. But when you're surfing the waves, you're actually having fun. So the waves are still coming in. It's just how you choose to engage with the waves. Either I'm getting pulled in or I'm learning to surf. So when we come into alignment, we actually start to surf the waves, which is such a more happier, joyful, freer process. So that's it for my discussion for today. Thank you, everybody. And we'll just open up the floor to a few questions before we wrap it up.
Thank you so much. That was really, you know what, I love the way you said surfing. I think that's what we all need to look at life as. Yeah, enjoy and just take it as it comes, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. If anybody has any questions, please unmute yourself, or you can write in the chat as well.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Salam.
I actually like you when you like the words you said, A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim, because at the end, Shaitan is going to say, it was you who did it. I just whispered to you.
Mm.
Yeah. So that was really, really profound in the sense that it made you think, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like it forces you to take responsibility and accountability, right?
Yes.
Instead of saying, oh, this is Shaitan's doing, it's like, no, hold on. The Shaitan is in you. It's your shadows, essentially.
Yes.
So we're seeking refuge from our shadows, both
Yes.
internally and externally. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody
Okay.
has any questions?
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I'm just reading them right now. Thank you for that. Yes. Yes, may we all get on our surfboard and align. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, thank you.
I think the fact that you said about Auzu Billah, I think, you know what, it makes it so much relatable. And I think now when we're doing things in our daily life, I think it will be something that we will be probably mentioning it more often, because the way you've said it is in a different context, but it kind of all relates together. Just the way how you said about sinning, and you know, like the month of Rajab as well. And it's a perfect way to explain that when we do sin, it is pulling us from our alignment, isn't it? And it's beautiful the way you've related it. You know, istighfar, asking forgiveness, and you know, it's part of our life, isn't it? It's just constant, isn't it? Constantly being in that state and sitting with your emotions. So thank you so much. Beautiful. It's really all connected together. So thank you so much for simplifying it. When you did say the topic, it just felt like a huge topic and where you would be heading it, but you've made it so simplified and you've given us some practical tips that we can all work on, inshallah. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for joining in.
Can I add something, please?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Actually, when we are standing in namaz, and we need that huzur-e qalb, the presence of the heart. That is actually living in the now. But are we doing that? Are we able to do that? If we are able to do that, then we can do it in all phases of our life.
Yeah. And you know, I would even say here that, you know, let's take the pressure off and instead look at it, again, from that space of curiosity, and say, okay, when I'm praying my salah, I'm not heart-centered, which means I'm not in that moment, in the present moment. And so I'm not getting the full experience of what salah can really offer me. And so again, just being curious, I prayed my namaz, I've been praying my namaz this past few months, and that heart-centeredness is missing. Okay, well, let's be curious about this. I feel sometimes it's, when we say, oh, see, I'm not experiencing the present moment, but the undertones of that statement is almost like, maybe I'm not worthy. See, I'm not worthy enough, so I'm not experiencing that. So I find sometimes it's so important for us not to be even in a space of judgment, but just be in a space of curiosity. I'm not able to experience that. Okay, all right. So what can I do? Perhaps I just need to do some of these processes that Sayyedah has talked about, simplify my life, declutter my mind, declutter my physical space, sit with my emotions, get familiar with what triggers me. And in that process, as you start doing that process, you automatically, you start coming into a heart-centered space. And then slowly, a fraction of your salat will be spent in the present moment. And then you keep up with the practice. And then the next salah, there'll be more of presence involved. And then you're just slowly building the muscle. So when we look at it from that space of, curiosity and just being compassionate with ourselves, right? I feel that goes such a long way. So thank you for that. Absolutely. And you're right. As soon as we're able to start experiencing that heart-centeredness in salah, like that just then translates in all aspects of our lives, so.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Do you have an Instagram handle?
Instagram, say that you've got an Instagram.
Yes. Yes. I'll just send it to everybody here. It's Sayyedah_Hassanali. There we go. That's my Instagram handle.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And please keep us in your prayers, and inshallah, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Sayyedah. Thank you to everyone for joining in. Have a blessed Friday and enjoy your day. Thank you. Khudafis.
Hafiz.
Thank you.